No, I've never been here.
There we go. All right. Welcome to class, everybody. And today we're joined by special guest Javian. He will be off screen, and I won't be saying his last name. Today we're going to be continuing. Does any of you have your books?
No.
Of course not. That's all right, because I tend to go off script a lot with this particular class. So we are talking about beginnings, I guess, to bring Javian up to speed. This whole year is about defending the faith against those who would criticize it and say that our Christian faith is dumb because we hate science and stuff like that. And we spent a while talking about the basics of apologetics, and now we're getting into the beginnings, because the atheistic story of how the universe began is extremely different than the biblical account. And the atheistic account is supposedly based on science, but as we're going to be seeing in this class, the science is not as conclusive as it looks. So last time we talked about the various problems with radiometric dating and ways that the Earth is assumed to be very old, when in fact the dating method has those assumptions built into it, and you could just as easily have other explanations for how a very young Earth could produce the same kind of specimens that we have in the present. A big thing that we have yet to deal with is fossils. And I don't know why I introduced that, because we're not going to talk about that today. What we are going to talk about today, which is relevant to fossils, is biological evolution. So we're just going to fast forward through the Big Bang and everything, and here's Earth, and I actually have to teach you guys what the theory of evolution is before I can teach you why it's wrong, or rather, more precisely, what it isn't, and where the limits are. Because evolution itself is not wrong. Populations of animals do change in response to changes in their environment. And that is something that is perfectly biblical, perfectly Christian, and perfectly scientific. But the problem is when you try to extrapolate back in time and assume that everything is descended from one common ancestor. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So first, I want to tell you a story. It's the story of Charles Darwin. Have you guys heard that name before? Charles Darwin? Huh?
I am Charlie Gordon.
Charlie Gordon? Okay, that's not Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was alive in the 18th century. No, excuse me. I think 19... Okay, I forget when Charles Darwin was alive.
How do you spell it?
He's dead now. Darwin is D-A-R-W-I-N. Are you going to Google it for me? All right. Charles Darwin went on a boating expedition to a group of islands called the Galapagos Islands. And what he found there was very interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and draw them in green. This is in no way an accurate map. But what he found was there's a whole bunch of islands, and on each of these islands there were finches, which is a type of bird. Yeah?
February 12th, 1809 to April 18th, 1882.
So 19th century. Okay, very good. Mid-19th century. About the time the U.S. was fighting...
18th.
Huh?
18th century.
19.
If it's the 1800s, it's the 19th century. It's always, it's not very intuitive.
So it's the 21st century?
It is, yep, we are in the 21st century.
You're throwing me off whack.
Okay, so Charles Darwin...
22nd.
Charles Darwin sailed his boat, the Beagle. He was, it was much bigger than this. I'm just drawing a picture. And they went around these islands, and as he went around the islands, he found that there were finches on these islands. Guys, please pay attention. I don't know what you were saying, Daniel, but just, all right. Anyway, he found finches on these islands, and he noticed that they were different. This island over here had a population of finches that had very thick beaks. That's not very good. Thick beak. There we go. And these beaks happened to be very good for crunching the walnuts and chestnuts and other kinds of nuts that are found on the island. So I'm going to do my best to draw a nut. And then the bird came from that island. And then on this island over here, there were also finches, but they had very long and skinny beaks that were very good for picking bugs out of cracks in tree bark and things like that. And wouldn't you know it, but this island had an abundance of bugs living on it. And so these finches were perfectly adapted to get those bugs. shape of beak that's good for fruit, but you can imagine, I don't know, toucan sand from Fruit Loops. There we go. So let's pretend that that is a good adapted beak for fruit, and wouldn't you know it, but on this island there was lots of fruit. Now the interesting thing is that the birds were not able to go from, no wait, that's not true. The birds were not able to go to the mainland. That's what it was. And whatever food was abundant on an island, the birds living on that island had beaks that were adapted to eat that food. Well, we say adapted, but that word hadn't really been used that way yet. It was Darwin who realized that what probably happened was that all of these birds, I'm going to draw them over here all together. All of these birds, the Fruit Loops bird, which I love that I just came up with that, and the big thick nut crunching bird and the skinny beak bird, that these birds were probably all descended from a common ancestor. That what probably happened was that at some point there was a big storm or some other event that blew a mated pair or perhaps a small population of birds away from the mainland and blew them to these islands. And the birds spread out among the different islands, and on the island where there was an abundance of nuts, all of the birds that could not eat the nuts died. And the ones that survived to pass on their big fat beak genes were the ones that were able to eat the nuts. And similarly, all the finches that were on the bug island, of all the finches that were on the bug island, the only ones that were able to survive were the long-beaked birds. And so this idea that different subspecies or species, whatever you want to call it, different descendants come from a common ancestor is evolution. And we don't know what this guy looked like, so I'm just going to make a standard beak there with maybe that. Specifically, this type of evolution is called natural selection. And natural selection is A-okay. You might have heard that evolution is something of a bad word in the church, but that is not necessarily true, especially evolution by natural selection. What that means is that the genetic information for all of these birds is there. It's in the population, but sometimes they die. Some of them go extinct, locally extinct, or you can imagine on a global scale, if there was some catastrophe that changed the environment, that there would be a mass extinction. But this is more of a local extinction. So for example, all three of these guys might have lived on this island, but only these ones managed to survive. So these guys, if I could erase my X, I would just draw an X over these guys to show that they died, and this one stayed behind and reproduced. And then the babies that one had all had that kind of beak, and over the generations, that's how that population developed. You guys all right over there?
I'm fine.
Thank you. I'm glad you're fine, JB. Okay, so that is natural selection in a nutshell. Another way to look at it would be, this is an example of peppered moths. Actually, the peppered moth one I think was disproven, so I'm trying to think of a different real-life example. But I mean, this is a perfectly good real-life example. So Charles Darwin, he made this connection that these different birds were all descended from a common ancestor, and then he said this, and this is where he kind of started to go astray. What if the birds, so I'm gonna redraw that, but over here and very small, right? What if this was actually, that bird, that ancestor bird, what if that one also descended from a common ancestor that had other descendants that lived on other islands and developed in other ways? And what if that bird even descended from, I don't know, the same ancestor as modern lizards and stuff? So what if over here we have like lizards and birds, they both have hollow bones, they both have growths all over their surface, either scales or feathers, so, there's some similarities there. And what if the common ancestor of birds and lizards also shares a common ancestor with amphibians? And what if some of these die out early, they go extinct and all that we have left are fossils, right? So maybe there's a whole line of dinosaurs that died, and it only exists as fossilized skeletons now. And so Darwin was like, and then what if they also have a common ancestor with mammals, right? Like dogs and cats, and even humans. So I'm going to start drawing some pictures here. We got humans, we got frogs. There's a big mouth frog, and we got the birds over here. There's birds, and then lizards. I don't know, lizards. That's a pretty good lizard, yeah. And so this is the modern creatures that we observe today, from humans to frogs to lizards to whatever else. And you got your fish over here. I'm super oversimplifying this now because it takes a long time to draw. But what are you guys doing?
No.
Everett, 1 hour, dude. 1 hour.
I'm not doing anything. He grabbed my hand.
I did not.
All right. Well, don't be a
I
disruptor.
hit my
Be
shoulder
shaken.
and I grabbed his hand and squeezed it.
Okay, so the theory of evolution, Darwin's theory of evolution, I should say, basically takes this idea, which is a pretty good idea, and then extrapolates it way back into time until you get this is supposed to be a fish, there you go, until somewhere way back here you get some one-celled organism that is like the first thing that ever came to life. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of modern one-celled organisms as well. That's a whole different branch. But the point is that we have all of these creatures that are so diverse and so different now. But what if, in the far distant past, just as this diverse population descended from a single common ancestor, what if all of this diversity, all of the life on Earth, even the plants, I forgot to draw like plants, trees and stuff. They all have a common ancestor from way back at the beginning. And Charles Darwin published this theory in his book, The Origin of Species. On the Origin of Species. Have you guys heard of that book before?
No.
No,
Okay.
I'm reading 4 White Pebbles or 4 Perfect Pebbles right now.
Okay, that's probably not Darwin.
I'm reading 67.
It's actually called On the Origin of Species and the Preservation of Favored Races. Preservation of favored races, because of course we have to introduce racism, but that's what he does. On the Origin of Species and the Preservation of Favored Races. So in it, he basically takes this true story, this very likely scenario that is perfectly okay, and he upends the biblical explanation of life, and he says, rather than saying God created everything, what if everything simply descended from a common ancestor? Now, what's the first question you might have? Just hearing that. Huh?
Where's Jesus?
No, not where's Jesus. So if we are eliminating God from the creation of life by saying that everything just descended from a single universal common ancestor, what might you ask? Yeah?
Where did it come from?
Where did that come from? Thank you. I didn't think it was a hard question. So if everything descended from a single one-celled organism, the question is, where did the single one-celled organism come from? And this problem has a name. It is called abiogenesis. Genesis means beginning, bio means life, and a means not. So that beginning, a beginning without life is what it means. So what created this? And there's no answer to that. The evolutionists don't have an answer to that, I should say. They just take it on faith that at some point something came to life. Some collection of organic molecules started working together in a way that could use energy and grow and develop and reproduce. And we don't ask that question. At least we're not supposed to. So that's one of the issues that we already see with Darwin's theory of evolution. Another one, and this one's a little harder to spot, right? But remember what we said about these different populations of finches, right? They were born by natural selection, or I should say they evolved. They evolved by natural selection. That means that nature had a choice, if you will, right? Any one of these beak shapes was within the population already, and based on the constraints of the different islands, nature selected one winner, if you will, right? The fruit island had the winning fruit bird, the nut island had the winning nut bird, and so on. So nature selected from what was already there. So this little picture that I've drawn here kind of makes it look like we've got more information, right? There's only one type of bird here, but there's 3 types of birds there. So it seems like we're getting more birds, right? But look at what's actually happening. All 3 of these birds are contained within this one. It's the parent. And what nature is doing is it is actually removing information. It is saying on this island, these 2 beaks died. And on this island, the other 2 beaks died, and so on. So natural selection, by its very definition, can only take from what's already there. Natural selection does not, I'm gonna add this in blue here, does not explain new traits. And this is a big misunderstanding that a lot of people have about evolution. Is evolution by natural selection, it takes from a pool of what's there, and the winner is decided by competition, right? So they compete over food, and only one beak shape is able to win based on the food that's on the island. Or in another case, say there's a change in the environment and it starts snowing more. Or snowing less. Sure, let's go with global warming, right? So if global warming is real, and that's a topic for another day, but let's assume that it is, and suddenly places that used to have lots of snow are no longer getting snow, what's going to happen to all of those white-furred creatures that have adapted to blend in with the snow?
Yeah.
They die, right? And is that just going to be a barren desert of no creatures then? No, because some of that population is going to survive because it has darker fur, and the darker fur blends in better with the background. And so over time, the population changes, the population evolves, but it's not like the white-furred creatures magically started growing dark fur. It's more that the genome for that creature has both white fur and dark fur. And when the conditions change, the dark fur ones with the better camouflage are able to thrive and outcompete the lighter ones. The same reason why the lighter ones were there to begin with, because it was snowy. So when the environment changes, the population changes. And that is natural selection, but it does not explain new traits. Now, how do we get new traits then? Right? Darwin probably thought of this. Yeah?
Is it when different species mate?
It is not, because different species can't mate. Well,
like the same type of animal, but different breed.
Breeds, yeah. So that's breeding still does not explain new traits, because what breeding does is it can help to bring out traits that were already there. Genetics is very complicated. So you can have what's called recessive genes that are in your body, that are in your DNA, but do not actually get expressed. Somewhere deep inside me are the genes for a tall man, and they are recessive in my body for whatever reason. So here I am.
There's short man in my genes.
There might be, yeah. You have the human genome in your body, but it's like I said, it's very complicated. The way that it all works, and so when you're breeding, you are causing traits that might normally be recessive to come to the fore in new and various ways. That was a good guess, though. So that might get you different kinds of dogs, right? If you breed dogs, let's say. But you can't breed a dog with a cat, right?
No, you can.
No, you can't.
I mean, technically you can. It might not work out.
You can make them do the deed or whatever if you want to be gross, but they won't reproduce. That you cannot. A dog cannot impregnate a female cat and vice versa. That's just not, it's not possible. For all kinds of reasons. It's not even close to possible. No.
Wait, they're
All right.
both dudes.
All right,
It's
all
not
right,
gonna work.
bring it back. Yeah, I know, we want to talk about that. But this is a real problem. And the way that evolutionists get around this problem, which they acknowledge is a problem, is they bring in a new factor called mutation. I'm going to write mutation over here because this tends to be the good science board today, and this is going to be our bad science board. So mutations are how they explain the changes and the presence of new information. And the way this works is are you familiar with what a mutation is? What's a mutation?
Deform.
Like a deformity.
I'm glad you guys immediately think.
Like him.
I'm glad you guys immediately think it's a deformity because you're already seeing the problem
Or wait, is it like
with
a change?
mutations being used to explain this, huh?
Isn't it a change in the body?
It is a change, yes. So
The biggest mutation ever.
your DNA contains your genetic code. It's what makes you you. And sometimes there are mistakes that are made when your genetic code is copied, and your code is copied a lot. Whenever you grow, whenever your skin cells are replaced, and crucially, when a new child is born from conception, there's a lot of copying happening, and sometimes a mistake in that early copying process can really change what comes from it. And unfortunately, like you guys pointed out, most mutations are bad, right? Mutations, in fact, truth be told, all mutations that have ever been observed have been bad. They've always resulted in a loss of information. Occasionally, that works out to its advantage. There's an account of a species of fly that lives on a windy island, and because the wind is so intense, any flies that try to fly will get blown away into the ocean and die. And so there's a species of fly that has adapted to these conditions by losing their wings. So that is a mutation, right? Flies by nature can fly. So the loss of wings is obviously a mutation, and it's a loss, it's a deformity. But in that specific environment, it ends up helping them to survive. But even so, mutations always result in the loss or corruption of genetic information. But there is a chance, if you roll the dice enough times, there is a chance that a mutation might theoretically somehow become a beneficial thing for a population, might somehow add more information to the gene pool. Everett?
So could I have a mutation that makes me really smart?
Maybe. Not now. This would be like when you're born, or rather when you're conceived. It's a little late for you now, I'm afraid. Yeah, just like it's a little late for me now to have a mutation that makes me tall. We're talking at when you're first conceived and you're still growing in your mother's womb. That's when these kinds of mutations take place.
I think that's called a growth spurt is what you want.
Yeah, no.
How tall are you?
Who says I want it? I'm 5.5 feet. It's a decent height.
5.5, like 5'1.5".
5'6".
Oh.
5 and 1/2.
Oh, I thought you meant like
I'm
5
6
foot and half.
Or you said 5. You can 5'5", 5.
5'6".
I'm 6 inches taller than you.
Cool. Okay. So evolution, the Darwinian evolution, tries to explain the origin of all species as having come from an original progenitor, it's called, a first life that's made, over time, made all this other stuff. And they explain the rise of new information by saying that it's mutations, and they use natural selection to explain how good mutations, rare though they are, can survive, whereas the bad ones, they just die off. The problem is because good mutations are so rare, they're actually only a theoretical thing. We've never actually observed them, but mathematically they're possible. Because it's so rare, all of this has to have taken an incredibly long time, right? This kind of stuff cannot happen in a few thousand years. This is going to take millions of years, billions of years even. Just statistically, it would have to. And so it is actually Charles Darwin's theory of evolution that first creates a necessity for the Earth to be very old. We talked last week and the week before about the myth of the old Earth. that the earth does not have to be millions of years old, and the fact that you have to be told constantly that the earth is millions of years old is kind of a warning sign that maybe it's not true, because if something is not true and you want people to believe it, the best way to get that done is to repeat the lie over and over and over and over again. So, for as often as you've heard that the earth is millions of years old, I'm saying that it's not, and the science doesn't bear that out. I am saying that if you believe in this model for the beginning of life, you have to believe in an old earth. And so once you believe something that requires an old earth, then suddenly you start seeing a lot more evidence for an old earth. Okay, questions so far? I have explained the theory of evolution by natural selection and mutagenesis.
I feel bad for the bird with the small beak.
Why?
Are you the bird with the small beak?
I'm the one with the giant one. You're the one with the slow one.
Alright.
Me.
Well,
Look at the hole in the
The
wall.
bird with the small beak does very well at eating bugs, which is what it is adapted to do. So don't feel bad for it. If it lived on a different island, you could feel bad for it because it would probably die. But for the island that it's on, it's fine. Now, so we've already talked about what some of the issues are, just as a general term, or general idea of the theory of evolution. Now we're going to look at a much darker chapter of the history of evolution, which is human evolution. Okay? We've talked before about how, guys, put your phones away. All three of you, really.
Chip could just spit on it.
Who did?
Daniel just spit on his phone.
Okay, well, I don't know why he
My Apple logo
does
is
that.
on the
Okay, yeah, I don't care. Just put it away. It's a distraction. So, alright, so obviously we have the question of where did the first cell come from? And a lot of atheists, a lot of evolutionists who refuse to let go of this, even though abiogenesis has never been observed, isn't even theoretically possible. A lot of them worm around this by saying that actually this one-celled organism from which we're all descended was planted here like a seed from an alien civilization, or perhaps just from another place. Perhaps just from another place where life did evolve. So they're admitting that Earth cannot create life from non-life. Everett, are you okay?
Probably dust from that cord.
Okay.
It sticks to your throat.
So some evolutionists even admit that on Earth we cannot create conditions where life can arise from non-life. So that must have happened in some other world, and then that life somehow escaped that world and seeded itself in Earth, and that's where it came from. So the problem of abiogenesis for them is answered with what's called panspermia. I'll throw that one in red. Panspermia. Pan means everywhere, and sperm, haha, yes, means seed. So panspermia is the idea that the seeds of life came from somewhere else. And that way we kick the can further down the road and be like, well, we don't know where else it came from. You know, maybe we'll look at the stars with fancy telescopes and figure it out. But in the meantime, that's just one other false, we say it's false as Christians, because obviously all of this contradicts the Genesis account that we believe. But scientifically, it is completely unverifiable. You know, what if life came from other worlds? Wow, what if? Can we test that? No.
Let's see, is Jamie's blood red?
So far, every bit of observation that we've done on other worlds has shown absolutely no life or even signs of life. So if you do operational science where you actually observe and test and repeat, you have to conclude that panspermia has absolutely no scientific bearing. Yeah?
Do you know they just found Noah's Ark?
No, they didn't.
Yeah, they did.
They've been finding Noah's Ark for hundreds
No,
of years.
they actually found it now.
Oh yeah?
In Utah.
In Utah?
Yeah, they found it in Utah.
You realize how ridiculous that is, right?
That wouldn't even make sense.
Yeah,
It was somewhere, but like they found like skeletons inside of it, like fossils, but
Okay. I promise you, Noah's Ark is not in Utah.
Look it up. No, not Utah. That just came to my mind.
Was it on a mountain in Utah?
Okay.
No.
Noah's Ark has been found thousands of times over centuries, and it has never panned out to be anything. Noah's Ark was probably disassembled by Noah because he had a lot of very good lumber in a world without any mature trees, and they needed to build houses and fires and, furniture. So Noah's Ark was probably systematically deconstructed by the same people who built it within their own lifetime. So sit on that for a while and then tell me that they found it sitting on a mountain somewhere.
I found it.
Anyway, we're not talking about Noah's Ark today. We'll have to come back in a couple weeks, and we'll really dive into the flood
You're
narrative.
coming back in a couple of weeks.
Every week we're going to talk about worthwhile things, but we're not done this week, because now I want to talk about Darwin's other book. He wrote the one book on the origin of species, and honestly, what he was saying, all of this stuff, was very controversial. And so he kind of pulled quite a few punches in that he did not say everything that he wanted to say. He simply presented his data on the finches, and then he presented his theory that all of the species originated from a single common ancestor. When it took off, when the origin of species became very popular, Darwin wrote a second book called On the Descent of Man. Yeah, so this one is just talking about animals as a whole. This one is now talking specifically about people. And this book right here is extremely controversial and bad, and has been used to justify all kinds of, frankly, racism. Nowadays, racism is like, I don't like the way that you look, so I don't like you. But
Yeah, I don't like it.
but in not that long ago, racism was a lot more sinister in that it was backed by science. So here's the deal: is just as there are different races of humans, right? I'm just gonna, you know what? I have different colors. Let's make them all different colors. Different races of humans. Come on. I'm gonna be going back and forth a lot here. Got our different races of humans, and we all know, and the Bible tells us as well, but scientifically we can verify that all of the humans are descended from the same common ancestors. You're killing me.
Why didn't you make a white person?
The whole board is white.
That was a joke.
Okay,
Why
very good.
didn't you make a black
So
person?
nowadays we know that that all humans are descended from a single mated pair of humans, or a single population, if you want to really get technical. And then if you're an evolutionist, you would plop this guy somewhere near the bottom of this tree, and back it would go to the apes and stuff like that. This is not always how it was taught, though. When Charles Darwin wrote The Descent of Man, this is what he believed: that certain humans were descended from certain monkeys. So, for example, you have the white man was descended from the intelligent chimpanzees. I'm realizing now that I might not be able to draw very good monkeys. But the white European man was, of course, descended from the intelligent chimpanzees. And then the black African man was descended. It looks a lot like a finch, doesn't it? Was descended from the big brutish gorilla, who I don't know how to make it look less like a bird, but that's supposed to be a gorilla. Gorillas are big and strong and kind of dumb, and so the Africans are descended from them. And then you have the Asian people were descended from orangutans, which I'll admit the only thing I know about orangutans is that they have very long arms. So there's your orangutan ancestor of the Asians. And by presenting it this way, what
about the Chinese?
Those are the Asian people. Yeah.
Japanese.
Those are also Asian people.
What?
They
This
are.
is news to me.
I'm just basing it on their continents. This is Europe, this is Africa, this is Asia. I'm not saying that all the Asians are the same or whatever. This is just based on location, yeah?
What about Antarctica?
Antarctica doesn't really have any native life. And then I don't know, I guess, I don't know what Darwin thought about Native Americans, but nowadays we know that they came from Asia, so, yeah?
What about Indian?
Indian? Okay, if you mean American Indian, I literally just said they migrated from Asia. If you mean Asian Indian, I defer back to Asia.
Okay, you covered
Yes.
all of them.
India is in Asia. Yeah, basically got every continent except Australia, I guess, which they're
that?
probably
What's
Asian, they're probably Asian
We
too.
don't know.
The point is that by presenting it this way, by saying that different races of human is descended from different kinds of apes, Darwin was able to convince people that there were actual substantive differences between the different races of people that were based on what they descended from. So Darwin would say, for example, that white European people were just smarter than black African people. Because they're descended from smarter apes. And similarly, the Australian Aborigines, I know I just said Australians are separate, but the Aborigines, which are a native tribe to the continent of Australia, were paraded around as subhumans for a long time. There was one put on display in the New York City Zoo for a long time. An actual human being put in a cage and displayed like an animal because he was an Australian Aborigine. Yeah?
Whichever ape I was pretty dumb.
Maybe. But is that really all you wanted to say?
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad you can't pass up an opportunity to talk about yourself.
Okay, to be fair, compared to what he says, I'm sitting pretty chill.
Yes, I know. I need the girls in this class to kind of bring the intelligence spectrum
Well, they
back.
never come. Are they even gonna get confirmed?
They're not able to come half the time, every other week.
Am I gonna get confirmed?
You'd have to do 3 whole years with me. So if you want to start
Oh, no,
now,
you would, oh no, you wouldn't
It's-
even be with Ada.
It's a little
I wouldn't even be
backwards.
able to finish.
Actually, no.
I'd be out of high school.
you would be with Teddy. Teddy starts next year. My son, he's in 5th grade.
So like, it's just one-on-one, so you could do it in your house.
Yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to, we could do one-on-one sessions, and I could kind of accelerate you along.
Yeah, what if you just did like 7 lessons a week and then you're done like,
Yeah.
half the time?
7 lessons a week. Oh my gosh, that would be brutal for everybody involved. How's about if you're actually serious, Jake, and we talk after class? But right now, I want to talk about what we're doing. Okay, so do you guys see the problems inherent with this?
Yeah, Everett's an ape.
No. The problem is that you can literally say that some people are just better than others based on the color of their skin or the continent of their origin. And even though it is very well documented that people from different continents are able to reproduce, Darwin was able to convince multiple generations of people that this garbage is true. And so then racism, which has always existed and always been bad, racism is suddenly now scientifically justified. And it is hard to overstate how bad this was for society. Thankfully, nowadays, we have confirmed the biblical account of all humanity being descended from one population. Why?
I was cleaning up the corn crown.
Pick it up later. Gosh. I mean, I got 15 minutes to kill. Let's see. Can I engage you guys for 15 minutes? Okay. Another thing about the descent of man and about the origin of species is that there is no evidence of this in the fossil record. Okay, so you would think that if the Earth has existed for billions of years and there has been this long trend of evolution, that you would find consistently fossils from basically every step on this tree going all the way back. You would have a nice continuous flow of life going back to the beginning. In fact, you have almost certainly seen this image. Let's see if I can draw it quickly here, where you have kind of the hunched over chimp walking along, and then you have him kind of growing into a more upright kind of monkey, the old Homo erectus, it's called. Yes, that is actually what it's called. No, I don't apologize. And then ultimately it becomes like there's usually a whole bunch of transitional forms here, and so I'm paraphrasing.
How long forever?
This takes a long time to draw. But eventually you end up with a man. Now this is just a human being right
Snake in
here.
my boot. Ever took my phone?
Okay, that's obviously not a very good man. Okay, this is just supposed to be a human right here. And there's his arm, I guess. So, yeah, have you guys seen this before? Where you've got all these
No,
pictures?
I've actually never seen that.
And well, this is a pretty crappy reproduction of it. I have a picture of it in my book here that I taped in,
Oh,
if anybody's interested.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
You've seen that before, okay. So, you might think that every image in this little progression is attested to by fossils. That is wrong. It is not. Huh? Because I didn't want to be here all night drawing pictures for you guys. There are no fossils for these transitional forms. There is a very, very, very small number, like half a dozen fossils that are contested, where some scientists think that they might be a transitional form, and others think that they are just some undiscovered species of ape or some undiscovered race of human. But either way, there should be an abundance at every step of this ladder for every creature. There should just be an abundance of evidence of the creature slowly changing form. And there is not. It does not exist. What is actually in the fossils, the fossil record, are apes and humans. There are some creatures that have gone extinct, but they are not necessarily transitional. Certainly these guys don't exist at all. There are some creatures in the fossil record, like dinosaurs, that no longer exist. But there's no reason why you should think that creatures can't go extinct. I'm sure it happens all the time. But there's no transitional forms. That's a major problem. This is called the missing link problem. And sometimes you'll hear about that, the missing link. I actually haven't heard that phrase much lately. I heard it more when I was a kid. I think it's such a big weakness in the theory of evolution that people just don't want to talk about it anymore. Javen, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna ask something, but it was dumb.
Okay.
Ask it.
If it's a legit question, there are no dumb questions.
No, it was more being kind of smart out, but not really, but it was
Okay.
just
No,
a dumb, it was just a
Try
dumb
to
question.
argue with him.
If in your judgment it was a dumb question, I'll accept your judgment. Let's see here. Yeah, this tree of life business is based entirely on the fact that the bones look kind of similar, right? So if we're gonna group all of the finches like we did, if we're gonna group all the finches together, that's really just because they all look like finches and they all present like finches. And when you get into the fossil record, where you're digging up bones, you're gonna group things together just based on the similarities of the bones, the way that they look. But let me ask you this. So obviously we are presenting, maybe it's not obvious to you, but we are presenting the biblical account of God designing the world and designing the creatures that exist in it over and against the theory of evolution. So this kind of stuff here is wrong and it's not biblical. And let's see here. All right, I'm going to get rid of all this. And I wanna posit the correct scientific stance, and it has a name, and the name is intelligent design.
Like me, intelligent.
Intelligent design is not necessarily Christian. It's mostly Christians, but all that intelligent design says is that life is the work of an intelligent designer. And I'll go ahead and write it with capital letters here, but not everybody would agree with that, I guess. Life is the work of an intelligent designer. Now, this is a theory, just as Darwinian evolution is a theory. That means that it is an explanation of the data that we have. So as a good scientist, the first thing you should do is observe and collect your data, and then you form a theory that basically tells the story of why that data exists. So we have life, we have fossils, we have all this stuff, and Darwin's theory is this one that I've just spent most of the class time going through. The alternative theory that we're presenting is called intelligent design. Now, obviously, as Bible-believing Lutherans, you're just going to hold up Genesis chapters 1 and 2 and be like, this is how it happened. But that's not very scientific, and that's not going to convince anybody who doesn't already believe Genesis. So I call that Bible thumping, where rather than engaging a person's actual argument, you just throw your Bible at them and be like, here, read this, it has all the answers. And it does have all the answers, but you're not going to be winning very many hearts and souls by Bible thumping, yeah?
How many Bibles have you read?
How many Bibles have I read?
One Bible.
I've only read one translation of the Bible, like from cover to cover, if that's what you mean.
There's only one Bible.
No, like, I mean, in his life, like, if he had one, how many times have you read the Bible? There we go.
Oh, cover to cover.
Only one's cover to cover, to be honest. Yeah, I've studied it.
Did you just like read it like straight up?
Well, I mean, it took a whole year, but yeah, I followed a plan.
Well,
That was
you-
actually last year. I read the whole Bible in a year.
Was
So I
that
realized
fun?
I've been a pastor for 10 years. I've never done it, so I done it. I wasn't surprised by anything I found, but and I probably had never read certain parts of Ezekiel or whatever. To answer your question, was it fun? It was really cool to see how they all connect. I did try to read through the Bible in a year once when I was about your age. I was like 16 or 17 years old.
That was funny.
And thank you. And I got all the way through to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles is a slog, let me tell you. But the majority of Old Testament history takes place before 2 Chronicles, so really it's pretty good. Everett first, and then Jacob.
How many pages did you read today?
I didn't really keep track
Like
of it.
40 or
I just followed a reading plan. I've been putting it on the scroll every month. The newsletter that we have at our church. Yeah, so we call it the scroll. What was your question?
What's slog mean?
Slog? Oh, it means it's just slow. It's like trying to walk through a swamp or something. It's just, yeah, 2 Chronicles is very, very dull and very slow. Anyway, hold on.
Hey.
So this now, if you present it as a scientific theory rather than a religious statement, right? So we're not Bible thumping. We are presenting a theory that explains life. And so now we can test that theory. So, for example, if you have, let's look at engineering. Suppose you have an engineer who builds bridges, and he has a policy where every single bridge that he builds has got to be totally different than every other bridge that he's built. Imagine that, right? What that means is that his bridges would be unreliable. This one works really well, but this one doesn't work so well. Compare that to a guy who builds bridges according to the same principles, and they all look more or less the same, but they're all very reliable. Which engineer would you rather have building a bridge for you?
The reliable one.
The reliable guy, right? And what that means is that there's going to be a similarity. You know, if he designs 20 bridges in his career, there's going to be a similarity between them. They're going to look like each other. Does that mean that one bridge came from a different bridge?
Yes.
It
No.
doesn't, yeah. It means that all the bridges came from the same designer. And so, whereas Darwin looks at things like his finches that all look similar, and then he draws these crazy conclusions about how everything evolved from a universal common ancestor, we say, we look at stuff that looks similar, and we say, okay, it probably all came from the same designer. Let's see, with a little bit of time we have left, I want to introduce the flood narrative. We're going to have to come back to it in a couple of weeks because there's some important religious conclusions that we have to look at next week. But I anticipate that in 2 weeks we're going to talk about how Noah's flood affects what we observe in Earth. Because if you imagine that the whole world was covered in water at one point, it is going to have some ramifications. Yeah?
Where'd all that go?
It's still there, really. So yeah, you'll have to come back in 2 weeks to hear that. But basically the mountains were shorter. The mountains before Noah's flood were shorter, and Noah's flood introduced plate tectonics, which is how mountains form. These giant plates on the Earth's crust crash into each other, they crumble and make mountains. So yeah, once plate tectonics was introduced, you have giant pits open up where the water can flow into, like the Marianas Trench and the Mid-Atlantic Trench, and then you have continents and things that are raised up out of the water. So the Earth used to be like this, and now it's like this, and there's plenty of room in the lower parts for all that water. Javian.
How deep is the Mariana Trench?
I don't know, 5 miles, 6 or 7 miles.
Hey!
Everett, what's your question?
Wait, then how did the salt get in the water, making it salt?
For real. That's what I was gonna say.
Really?
From the ground, the minerals.
Yeah, so like, yeah, this is something that creationists and evolutionists would agree on, that the saltiness of the ocean comes from all of the rivers feeding into it, that carry salt from the soil and the earth that they flow through. So the salt in the topsoil and the sand and whatever, any salts that are in there dissolve in the water carries it down to the ocean, and then the water evaporates from the ocean, but the salt stays behind.
Big brain.
Interestingly, since you brought it up, we can measure the rate at which the ocean becomes saltier. Did you ever think about that? That the ocean must be getting
Does
saltier?
everybody get enough salt from the salt water?
Yeah, we evaporate the salt water with salt stays
That's
behind.
what sea
So
salt.
hold on, this is important. The ocean is getting saltier. You guys recognize that?
No.
If the ocean is salty because rivers carry salt into it, then as long as rivers are carrying salt into the ocean's going to be getting saltier, right? And we can actually measure how quickly the ocean is getting saltier, the rate at which it gets saltier. And if you work backwards using the same philosophy as carbon dating and stuff like that, you will find that the ocean cannot be more than a few tens of thousands of years old, based on the current measured rate of how it's getting saltier. And evolutionists have no explanation as to how the ocean could only be a little bit salty like it is. Javian.
How do we know how much salt is in the ocean if we haven't explored the old ocean?
It's a pretty safe assumption that the salt has spread out evenly across the whole ocean. So if you sample the ocean from lots and lots of different places and you find it is the same salinity, the same amount of saltiness everywhere, then it's probably a safe assumption that the whole ocean is salty. That, and if you actually put salt in a glass of water, it disperses very quickly. So there's no reason to think that only some parts of the ocean are salty. Everett.
Technically, wouldn't the salt go from the ocean and then back into the rivers and constantly do that?
No, because it doesn't get evaporated.
Yeah. So when the water evaporates, the salt stays behind.
Okay.
So you have this system where salt is being brought into the ocean and then it's never taken out. So the ocean should be extremely salty if this system has been in existence for millions of years. But it's not, which is a strong piece of evidence of a young Earth. Daniel,
Wait, so. Oh.
you can put your hand down now.
We forgot salt.
He's high.
Oh, so, with the salt water, like when the whole world was like water, you know? Like, was it all salt water?
It was a lot of water, and it was probably fairly fresh, I would imagine.
And then it just like, seeped in.
Yeah, well, I mean, the saltiness of the ocean, even according to the biblical accounts, is thousands of years of rivers flowing into it. So, yeah, even if the ocean had started out fresh, it would be salty now. Okay, so the last thing I want to say, and I want to do it because this cool diagram is up, we acknowledge the reality that certain creatures of today are descended from ancestors that no longer exist. For example, wolves and dogs and coyotes and all of them probably descended from a single mated pair of wolves. Unlike the evolutionists, though, we draw the line somewhere around here. There was just an event in recent history where all of the ancestors of today's creatures were created, right? And that was the creation of the world right there. So just kind of all along there. And this was roughly 6,000 years ago. Roughly 6,000 years ago, that would be 4,000 BC, wouldn't it? Roughly 6,000 years ago, about 4,000 BC is when this creation event happened. If you really want to get technical, there was a huge loss of genetic diversity in the flood, where only 2 of every animal was actually preserved. So if you ever wonder why people lived so long in the Genesis accounts, their lifespans plummet after the flood, and it's because we're all inbred degenerate mutants. Javian, what's up?
Nothing, I forgot.
Okay. All right, it is after 7, so let's conclude with the Lord's Prayer, and then I'll hand out homework. Ready? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Okay. In addition to your homework, which I have up here, give me just a moment to find it. There it is.
Yeah, you have to do the homework since
What?
Yeah, you have to do the homework.
Okay, hang on. I've also got an invitation to our ACT. Here, you can come too, Jamie. This
Yes,
Sunday
Jamie.
evening, we're having our regular church youth group event.
Okay.
Can't go? Okay.
Yeah, he said.
Well, you can
I'm-
just
I'm hunting.
hold on to it. Oh, you're hunting? Ah, crud. Is this hunting over? No, next.
No.
It is this weekend, isn't it?
I'm gonna go bow
Okay.
hunting, probably.
So in today's...
No!
What, you don't like the articles?
No!
So in today's homework, you have literally a 2-page article, which is enough to make Daniel crash out. 2-page article about, specifically about the making monkeys out of men issue that I was talking about, and the racism that develops from Darwin's theories. So you can read that and answer some questions about it. And next week, I would like to talk about the homework that I've been giving you. I've been giving you these really cool articles to read, and then you haven't been bringing it in and turning it
Oh,
in. So,
I have.
well, you have been, except for today.
Yeah, I
So,
forgot.
Everett, this is important. I want you to do the homework assignments that have been due for the last 3 weeks so that we can talk about them.